Welcome to NeuroNoodles Open Mic, Raw and Real Mental Health Chats. I'm your host, Pete Jansen, joined by Anthony Ramos, John Mekrut, and Dr. Marie Swingle. Think of this as your local mental wellness and technology pub where folks drop by to chat, share their thoughts, and dive into candid conversations. We're here to talk about everything from neurofeedback to the latest in mental health tech, and we do it all unfiltered and unscripted. Grab a drink, find a comfy spot, and join the conversation. Let's get real.
What's up, man?
Anthony.
Hey, how's it going?
Open chat.
I just listened to your debate podcast. At first I was really excited, but I guess you recorded before. I was hoping for fireworks. I don't know if we want to go there today.
Go wherever. We the debate podcast. Did I already go out?
I saw it on iTunes on my phone only. I couldn't even find it in podcasts on my computer. So, yeah, I did get to listen to it.
What I did here.
John,
let me see here.
Yeah.
You're supposed to schedule to go out at midnight.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to it. It was John and Mari and
Mari, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
That stuck out. That's all right.
Yeah.
It got out.
I mean, it was entertaining. I mean, so yeah.
Well, the artwork of Trump and Biden wearing the caps.
Yeah, you said the artwork. You said, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the thumbnail.
Oh yeah. I don't even know if it got to show me the thumbnail. Let me look what it looked like on my. Yeah, I just got the NeuroNoodles logo for mine. So.
Okay. All right.
I don't know what happened, but
whatever, you lucked out, you got it.
Yeah, so but probably pretty future seeing of you to know that would be an issue to ask about, though.
I don't
I like your LBJ reference on my wall.
Wait, which one?
Well, so I had been telling Courtney about LBJ versus, I'm sorry, not LBJ, Nixon versus Kennedy. When they debated and how he refused makeup, I guess, and he looked horrible. And you wrote on my wall, he goes, "This is another Nixon Kennedy."
Oh yeah.
This is on that level, and I think you're right. And I even heard afterward, I think even CNN said this will go down as the worst debate performance of all time, presidential debate performance.
Well, CNN turned on, because that's what I wanted to watch, is see what those guys did, and they turned on him in a heartbeat. And
they did, didn't they?
The difference between Nixon and Biden is, at the time, if you were in the car listening to the debate, you thought Nixon won. If you were in the car listening to Biden, there ain't no way you thought.
Yeah. That, I think in the podcast I just heard, I think it might have been Jay that brought that up, and I was like, oh, so whoever brought it up, it sounded like that Nixon would have won on the merits, but for the visuals. Yeah, so pretty insightful. And
well, that's what we are in this mental health podcast.
Yeah, it makes sense Jay was a little hesitant to comment, because anytime somebody writes on this, they say that it's inappropriate unless you're their doctor and you know their full medical history. I would say probably to be sure you're right, maybe. I don't know if we can say nothing from that performance. So.
All I know is I'm a voter. I got no medical license. I got an MBA, and you know what? That dude's not all there.
Well, in his and yes, and so the word that I had heard sounds right is diminished. He's not what he was even 4 years ago. I think most people would, and it sounds like the Democrats agree as well. Well, but I will say, what'd you say?
He's 81. How old is he?
I think he's like 83.
83. Okay.
Yeah.
That's even worse. So
he is.
I mean, it's impressive that was an A+ performance for him at 83, but
that's what I was about to say. In his defense, it was clear that he had memorized kind of these bullet points of lots of data, and he probably only got out, let's say, 3 of the 4 or whatever, generously, that he was hoping to, but it was clear he can still retain information. And somebody pointed out that he's never been a great, his strength is his folksiness. He's not going to impress you. And it's almost like they were trying to get him to impress you on the data or something. But
Yeah.
there was probably a lot going on there that, you know what the weirdest thing is right after the debate when he was thanking his supporters, he sounded much better. His voice was now he was yelling, he was shouting, but from that performance, I would have never guessed. And then I saw him the next day on the TV news giving a stump speech on the campaign trail, and he yelled every other phrase. And I know that the campaign told him to do that. You know, you need to show that you're still vigorous.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand. It feels like, a friend said, why didn't they just say he had a cold even if he didn't? It felt like it was a bit, in addition to whatever's going on, there's PR problems and debate prep problems. So.
Well, he was in Camp David for a week. I don't know how much more you can do. I think, he was hiding in 2020. I know we had the pandemic, but they hit him in the basement. At least they're bringing him out now. I don't know if they think they can just get him to step down and Kamala comes in. They got to figure out how to raise money for the election. So he's not going to step down. They're stuck. And
well, someone said that they have an easy way to get him to step down, which is to not donate money anymore. And that sounded it's somebody said it's like oxygen to politics. You can't run. So I would be surprised if they don't do that. Now, Kamala, CNN made the point. Her positives are not high. She is not as folksy. She's not known to be quite as relatable. But she would go after Trump. I have no doubt of that. She'd probably hold her own in the debate, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. So, yeah, well, I don't know what you do if you're
here's John. I know which way he's going to go.
Awesome. Yeah.
Biden wasn't that bad.
Here we go.
Welcome to Open Chat.
Recording in progress. You mean this is going to be like for people to watch and listen to?
Gee. Open chat.
Yeah, watch what we say because we're talking about the debate. So.
Oh God. Oh Lord. Please don't. Please edit all this out.
We talked about it before, and sure enough,
I had a cognitive collapse on Thursday night.
You had your own cognitive event.
Exactly. I felt my cortex just imploding.
I know.
What?
And I'm not crazy about either of them, but I have some sympathy. If you were in the tank for the president, you would be feeling pretty bad right now. I was trying to be gentle to my friends.
Listen, he's an old man. He's going to have dimes like that where it just happens.
Yeah.
I continue to be so impressed with Trump's ability to stand upright, start there. And given I know his dietary habits, I know his sleep hygiene, and you go, how in the hell is it? Thank God he doesn't drink or smoke.
Have you heard of short sleeping, Gene?
No, but he if there is one, he probably has it. I mean, there certainly are outliers in this world, people who can get by in 3-4 hours of sleep. And he clearly is one of them.
He's got to be. So there are some genes, I think they said there are 4 of them so far that are associated with the ability to function on less than 6.5 hours of sleep a night consistently with no negative effects. And he supposedly sleeps 3 hours a night, and he brags about how bad his diet is. And so,
the diet Cokes and all of the other, perhaps, I don't have this validated by any medical person, some of the perhaps enhancing medications that can be used around focus and attention skills. You read between the lines, but I mean, that's a combination that usually is deadly for people.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
What was that mannequin your guys put up there at the debate?
It was bad. I mean, it's just this flat out. It was bad. Bad performance.
What did they? If you're gonna shoot somebody up with, first of all, I ain't no doctor. I'm a voter. I'm a guy that just watched it. I'm a guy who watched CNN first just to get it, and CNN turned on them in a heartbeat. What were they? What do you think they were filling them up with? And did that cause his voice to go or whatever? Like what? He was.
I mean, personally, I just think it's an 80-year-old man who had a bad night. I mean, let's just start. That's my biggest takeaway. It's one particular moment in a person's life. It's the biggest stage you'll ever have, perhaps other than the State of the Union, in which he did quite well. Now, obviously, the accusations from the Republicans were he was on something. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. What do I know? Point is, everybody's going to have that moment. I've had them. You guys are too young to have them, but there are moments where I go, what the hell was I talking about?
But kind of, we were getting to the mental health part of it. I mean, at the end, his wife's walking him down and he's getting help down the stage. So there's something going on there.
He's an old man. I mean, I'm sitting here as a diehard Democrat.
Yeah.
And I am embarrassed for the party. And again, I don't think, honestly, Biden would have run for president in 2020. Except nobody else stepped up.
So why did they let him go? They knew this was going to happen, don't you think?
How do you can't, I mean, you sort of can't stop it. Guy says, I'll run for president. Nobody else is stepping up. I'll do it. That's the story around his candidacy in 2020.
Yeah.
And I'll go with that as the truth. And I'm looking around at being a Democrat. I know the landscape. I know all the players. Who else is going to get the job?
I think it's too seductive. And to Pete, I don't want to beat up on the man because I think he's getting older. I think maybe
you have to.
So what I was going to say is brain science. There was a study that came out in the last year, speaking to the walk. People, your walking speed is associated with your level of cognitive impairment. That is an association that's been found in the research. So if you walk slow, you probably have it's a greater likelihood you have cognitive impairment. The other thing is, I believe they found rate of speech is involved. And so I would not be surprised, since we know that cognitive impairment is associated with the slowed alpha peak frequency, you might find that if you look. Obviously, I can't guarantee that, but these are correlations.
Dr. Marie, guess what we're talking about?
Oh God. No. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi there.
Thought I'd join in on the inaugural session here. So what are you talking about?
Talking about the debate and Joe Biden and oh my God. He's an 81-year-old man. Do I expect he has cognitive decline? Of course. Of course. Would I prefer a 50-year-old vibrant human in the job of the presidency? Of course. Who is it? That's what I keep coming back to. Is it Kamala Harris? Is it, J.D. Pritzker? Is it, you go down the list of potential, Gavin Newsom, who's going to take this job?
Yeah. Do you want to hear what or the comment that the rest of the world is saying or seeing?
What are they saying?
Is Canada the rest of the world?
Yeah, what are they saying in Sweden?
Well, right now I'm actually in Sweden, and, there's this beautiful comic. And it's Biden in a wheelchair with an IV, looking all skinny and not quite there, versus Trump in an orange, jail suit with handcuffs on, and these are the two prime candidates for the most powerful job in the world. Was the subline?
No, it's horrifying. It's horrifying.
Rest of the world's
I heard the
jealous.
phrase, the old man versus the con man is what I.
Oh, I like that. The old man versus the con man. I like that.
Yeah.
No, but listen, it's a sad commentary on what's happened to American politics over my lifetime, frankly. But I mean, it's gotten older and older. I mean, Reagan was in decline. Everybody knew it. But, he sort of went with it. I was like, okay, whatever. Because it wasn't as profound. This is a profound, challenging time we're in, probably more challenging than when Reagan was president in some odd ways. Democracy is part of the conversation at this point. At least that's my take on it. And that's a contrast that we have to strike. For me, this is my political commentary. I will vote for an old man with dementia before I'll vote for a felon, period.
And
there's something wrong. There's something dangerous about Donald Trump, and I will, under no circumstances, vote for him.
And many people have died for your right to be able to say that. My point,
yeah, God bless.
On a mental health standpoint, where I'm trying to come from with this is not to deal with the polar opposites.
Okay.
It's how do we know he's got the mental capacity to stay in the office to invoke the whatever 20-something amendment? What would be the test that you would give?
Derail you. The issue here, the mental issue here is you have a cult. Okay. You have this weird following of an individual who's never called to account. If you look at, let's just say a bully in a classroom who just keeps on lambasting at the teacher all the time and never gets in trouble, never gets sent to the principal's office, never any repercussions. The rest of the class are going to admire this kid, this bully. And that's what's happening. If the culture of the US never gives this man any consequences, his cult is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's psychology 101.
Yeah.
We admire power regardless of the source of the power, whether it's evil power, malevolent power, positive power, etc.
Can we get
we've had this reference throughout history. This isn't even a new conversation. You go back to, Julius Caesar. I mean, there's untold numbers of people have risen on that platform.
Yeah.
So, but I honestly, I think this conversation should be more about who are we as a culture. These are the two people that, for whatever reason, we've put in that place. The Democrats with Biden, the Republicans with Trump. This is clearly what the culture wants in a certain way. I mean, everybody's a little terrified because they're so scared of Trump, so they're afraid that Joe Biden can't win. That's legitimate. I understand that. But he got there in the first place. I mean, go back to 2020. Why were we voting for Joe Biden when he was 76 or 77? It seems insane.
To take this back to the brain health for a minute, I just and don't take this as an endorsement. I'm not telling anyone who to vote for.
Right.
I think I have heard that aging is associated with reduced fluid intelligence, which is kind of the ability to solve problems, to think on the fly, but increased crystallized intelligence. And so I don't know, this doesn't need to be specific to Biden, but there is experience and wisdom that comes with age. And I do know, for instance, I've heard said about Biden, he's been in office for so long, he knows people, he knows what their drivers are, he knows the different international policy debates, kind of where the allies and enemies are. So that maybe that could compensate for some of this. I don't know.
That's the crystallized intelligence you're referring to. He's got he's got vast historical knowledge, but he's not he's not going to be as good on his feet. I get that. I'm not.
The whole definition of wisdom is pattern recognition, as far as I'm concerned. He knows the patterns, he'll be able to identify them rather quickly. Trump's patterns are me, right?
Well, it's apples and oranges.
Orange man bad, I get it. But the mental, how do you know that he has the mental either one of them? We don't. So there's no what mental test could you give him to say, you know what?
Well, I mean, we could do a QEG on both of them. That'd be interesting.
There you go.
I'm dead serious. That's where I'm going with it.
No. I listen. We went through this with FDR. In 1944. Here's a guy running for his fourth term. He clearly was sick. And we all voted for him anyway because
Woodrow Wilson,
Woodrow Wilson had a stroke. His wife ran the government. We've been down this road many times, but now we're in a very public culture where it's a lot more obvious. Television, all the rest of it.
Trump likes to brag about the cognitive tests he's passed, but as far as I understand it, those are sort of the minimum to say you're not impaired. They are not the kind of tests to show high IQ or something like this. So it's a little funny.
He recognized the clock, right?
Yeah.
He did the clock test.
Well, you guys, as Americans, how do you think you got there? I mean, the rest of the world has some really strong opinions just watching this cascade.
Wait, are we talking about politics or mental health? Politics is messy.
They're kind of
involved, Pete.
They're tragically intertwined, aren't they?
So for instance, Pete, there is a study out there that says that narcissism...
You know what? Hold on, Anthony. When you do these studies, put your source on them.
Okay. Anybody can Google these words. I didn't prepare exhaustive
notes.
I
know, but on Facebook, put the source, would you?
Oh my God, we're gonna have to have a bibliography at the end of each show. I read it on the website,
SciPost. But narcissism predicts Trump support. That does not mean every Trump supporter is a narcissist, but it means if you are one, you have increased propensity to support him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that makes sense. There's an interplay, I think, with mental health and politics.
No, that makes sense. But also, just to take the larger conversation, we have to look at the results tomorrow in England. Let's see what happens there. let's see what happens with Lafarge. You know, there's so many dynamics going on around the world. Marie Le Pen in France. You know, it's not just us. It's not just Americans.
Sorry. I mean, you guys really, really are winning the race in terms of absurdity here. You know, sorry.
To your point, no, is Marie Le Pen a Trump? You know, to put it in French politics, isn't she very, very similar in many regards?
I don't even think there's a comparison there.
Really?
No.
All right. I mean, I'll give the Conservative Party in England a pass because I think they got a core legitimacy. I can disagree with it, but there's a core legitimacy to it.
No, you don't have a base criminality. You don't have that.
Yeah, that's true. That's
narcissism. True. You don't have 77 lies per minute. Sorry.
No. Trump has elevated it to a whole other level. Yeah, a whole other level. So it's true.
Something that might unify the European picture, such as it is with ours, and mental health is that the demographics of all the first world nations are aging. And when you age, they have found there's a propensity to become more conservative. And they also found that conservatives are more fearful. Conservatives care more about law and order issues. The elderly care more. I was a political science undergrad, so I learned some of this. And the idea is, if you can fearmonger, that may have a greater effect on conservative populations. We're also going through economic upheaval in the last 10 years because we had the housing crisis, we had the pandemic. Now we have the declining birth rates, especially in Europe, firstly in Europe, but everywhere else too. And so that is an economic drag. And so I think a lot of these factors are conspiring to elect what they call populist candidates, who are candidates who kind of promise the moon, but then don't really even care if they can provide it. And the most vulnerable people. So for instance, Trump's support was correlated, or it was strongest among the Rust Belt voters his first time around, who had recently been laid off due to trade with China. So they have a grievance. And I think I heard recently, last thing, negativity is more of a motivator than positivity.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that makes
all the negative ads. And I think the key thing you said there, Anthony, is fear. The second you push that fear button, you have a big following. Yeah. So
because when did Trump break out, Mari? He broke out when he said they're coming over the border and they're taking they're raping and murdering. I think those are basically a paraphrase. That was when he first kind of went from, kind of a kook to some people really like this guy. That is what I recall, having lived through it, here. And that's not to say you can't agree with this policy or that. I'm not trying to paint everybody with the same brush. But I feel like he does try to arouse some of these emotions. And he did it in the debate.
No question about it. We're not a very rational species. So there you are.
Well, who decides if the president's capable, whether it's Trump or it's Biden?
We the four of us. I mean, we got as much a shot at it as anybody. Look, you're bringing up an interesting point. Should there be a cognitive test for aspirants to high political office? Supreme Court, I don't go down the list. Maybe.
I mean, one would think. I mean, also, if you look at, masking techniques, Trump's repetitivism, his unilinear thinking. I think he's masking a lot. I think he's far more cognitively challenged than anybody thinks Biden is. I mean, to me, that's absolutely clear. If you watch the behavior, the confabulation, et cetera, Trump is the one with the cognitive issues, not Biden. I think everything Biden is, it's wearing on his sleeve. You can see it,
Yeah, just read a transcript of a Trump speech. You just lose your mind.
Watch him step off the stage.
Because you start to read the transcript, you realize just how incoherent it really is. Because he has a nice bombast in a style that makes it sound more legitimate than actually what he's saying. It's just looping and repetitive. And I'm with you, Mari. I agree.
Digressing.
As a species, they say we respond more to confidence than competence.
Oh, absolutely.
Which really stinks because the Dunning-Kruger, the famous Dunning-Kruger study, one of the properties of that was that competence and confidence may be inversely correlated.
Yes.
So the guy who's really sure of himself, he's the one you got to watch. He may be making the most mistakes. And to me, that reminds me.
Be careful of anybody who calls himself an expert.
That's right.
And also, the deadly combination is ignorance and arrogance. Guess what we have here, right?
And I think it is partly our two-party system. I think you guys used the word adversarial last time. This is not set up for compromise, unfortunately, I don't think. And it's set up, the loudest figure seems to win, and the most aggressive, authoritative or authoritarian.
And I think that's more of a recent vintage, to be honest. I mean,
Okay.
I remember more compromise in my observation of early American politics when I was much younger. I see the head of the Republican Party sit with the head of the Democratic Party. They'd work out details and they'd agree or disagree, and they'd negotiate a middle ground. The middle ground has become untenable, it seems, for either party.
I think,
they can't.
When do you think that started? I think this is within the last 15 years. I mean,
I'm with you.
in world politics, it was the same, that, people would have these fierce debates and oppositions, but they were not trashing each other.
Right.
They were, I mean, I'm going to be a bit genderous, but in those days it was more generous. They were gentlemanly.
Yes.
Like you went to your job of politics and then you were a good human being otherwise. I mean, not everybody, of course, but
Right.
yeah.
Well, the amount of advertising impressions has increased just simply with the phone. So, they say Russia is influencing. Yeah, they're spending money on advertising. You're getting more impressions. That's aligning people on either side. And that's, what the Social Dilemma. I'll tell you all, watch that. That is beautiful on Netflix. It just tells you simply how all this stuff goes. And it's up to us to question everything and look at what's going on. So from the mental standpoint, is the Surgeon General, is he the one that's going to say, you know what, I don't think he's good to go?
Well, do we want to invest that level of authority in any one person or even a group of people?
Yeah.
I think everybody here, we know a lot about the brain, whatever. Anybody here say, I got it figured out?
Absolutely not.
That's what I'm
saying. With an open chat. What would the board be? Who would say, you know what? I would like to see this, this, and this to make sure that my president is competent.
And you can manipulate it all. I think the failure is so much lower. Is like, how can you prevent the rise of this type of situation? Like where is the failure in the system? But yeah, I think going out and checking mental health at the end, I mean, that's a low bar. It should be right at the beginning.
Well, the first issue is who can get the money. Okay, that's why he's there. You get the money, so you have the advertising. If you don't have the money, I mean, money's oxygen. Okay, so that's what you have.
Yeah.
So going down the road, if he steps down, I don't think they'll get enough money to put whoever is up. If Joe says,
but he's also consuming all the money.
Facebook,
forgot that little detail.
Instagram,
the Republican Party is broke because of Trump.
Yeah.
Oh, God silence.
Listen, I at the end of the day, we are left with it's us. We have to make the judgment as to whether or not our candidates. Yeah, right. God forbid. I think we as the populace have to make the decision, have to make the judgment as to whether or not our candidate is up to the job. I don't think there's I wouldn't believe an expert either way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I value expertise.
Yeah, I think is a great proxy for this is kind of the crime debate. So Jonathan Haidt is a researcher who's been talking about increase of anxiety among young people. Part of it he points to in the 90s, 24-hour cable news networks broke out, and to keep people watching, they would sensationalize things. So they find girl kidnapped, man killed by a car, and that was enough to keep people watching. He talks about how it made parents paranoid.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I think I've seen some data to suggest, by watching that stuff all day long, our negativity bias, that's what we attach to. Right. And I think crime is, I have to hear all the time, crime's crazy, crime's crazy. Yeah. If you Google crime right now, crime in the US is down. I just heard yesterday on a podcast by The Atlantic, there is a 7x reduction in serial killers in the US since the 90s. You don't hear about that.
Crime is lower than it was in the 1950s. We all put these. Yeah.
Because in urban areas, they're not prosecuting anybody.
Well, so there's a lot of factors.
Not to throw a bomb in the middle of the
conversation, and there's the fear. As you said, it's the negative bias. People will watch your news if it's negative, and then the fear. We're talking about negative and fear. We're right back to that magical combination that sucks us all down the drain.
Right.
What do they say?
Well,
nobody can look away from a car accident.
Right.
And that's the TV news knows that. Go on, John.
Well, no, I'm just getting a couple of comments. The news is news because it's unique. It's not because it's normal. The reason it's on the news is because it's out of the norm. That's the reason they put it on the news.
But
I think I'm going to digress. It's not anymore. You know, you get the same stories refed from different angles, different locations, different reporters, something. I mean, I could even spin this into sports. You know, if individuals are not interested in a specific game and you watch like the 3 hours pregame, the 5 hours postgame, like how can you keep on talking about this? You have to be a fanatic. And I think that's what's happened with American politics. They've created this fanaticisms. And how do you unlock from that? I'm going to loop right into my research here in terms of, you know, the attention economy, the algorithms to keep you engrossed. And the way they do that is playing with the arousal template that loops right back into the anxiety and surprise, surprise, depression. Right.
But Mari, I was speaking to your idea of, you know, woman killed in, you know, terrible, you know, by rapists in the back alley someplace. That's a unique experience. It doesn't happen that often. But we see it on the news because it's unique. It's not the norm. This doesn't happen all the time. As you say, crime rates are down. There are less murders. We're living it right now in an age where, by any metric you want to think of, food scarcity, economic survival, you know, all of the metrics are better than they have ever been in the history of the world. Less people are starving. Less people are dying of infectious disease. You look across the board. This is the best time in the history of humanity. And you wouldn't think it by watching television. You think the whole thing's collapsing.
We're living better than royalty in the 14th century.
Exactly right.
Two things. If the news were 30 minutes of all positivity, what would the ratings be?
Oh, it'd be zero.
Zero.
Okay, number two.
Yeah.
John,
we'd have a good life.
John, when's the last time you've been to San Francisco?
It's been years.
Why don't you take a stop by?
No. Listen, yes, of course, there's homelessness, there's crime, but we get all that.
Yeah.
But it's not worse than it was 30 years ago. It's just not.
Yeah.
That's the same.
Homelessness may be an exception. Yes, there are more homeless people now than there were 30 years ago. But that's an economic conversation, or a fentanyl conversation, or a mental illness conversation. You know,
that's a drug conversation too.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are problems.
Addiction, right.
But we can. These are problems that we can solve. It's not that mental health was better 30 years ago necessarily. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. My guess is it's probably been pretty steady throughout. There've been bipolar people since the beginning of time. There've been people with mood disorder.
I don't know.
Maybe not. You think there's more mood?
And depression are much higher. I think, we were talking about this, quite a little while ago in terms of the overprotection of children, very little resilience, and of course the constant stimulation from arousal of interactive technologies, all of those things. The other one is sleep deprivation, right? I mean, most of us are functioning on minimum of 2 hours less sleep per night. What does sleep deprivation do? Okay, it grossly affects your hormones, the circadian rhythm, your mood, your cognitive function, all of the above. We're just not as healthy, including our mental health. And I think it all, bundles in at a certain point, But the kids now, I know kids hate being called kids, but youth and children are much more fragile in a much more negative way. And afraid, the fear. The fear mongering that was going on. I mean, that's part of the parenting trap, which I think everybody's familiar about. I mean, I think, Anthony, you're obviously the youngest person on the panel. But, we all would go to the store at certain hours of the day or night and, ride our bikes all over the bloody place, and nobody was ever concerned. I mean, the rule was be home when the street lights went on or at a certain hour, and nobody was worried, and we were all relatively safe. You had the community parent, not the imposing parent telling you how to raise your kids, but somebody would check out the window occasionally, make sure somebody wasn't dead on the road. Right. And you know, so we were, and we scraped our knees, and we got ourselves up, and we didn't typically go home crying when we scraped our knees. We got back on our bicycles. There was a resilience, and now parents feel a need to drive their children 2 blocks to school. Yeah. Right? What does that tell the child? That tells the child you need to be afraid. That tells the child there's something unsafe in the 2 blocks in your exclusive neighborhood to your public school. You know, and in that school, you can't hug anybody. And in that school, I mean, we can go on and on. I could very easily get on my diatribe here. But I mean, the way we're socializing, I would say young people, takes us to where we are, whether we're older people, middle-aged people, or younger people. We're just functioning from a platform of fear now that I don't think is real anymore.
Anthony, what's been popping up in your Facebook chat so we can get out of the politics stuff?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's the first time I'm meeting Dr. Swingle, and it's really nice to meet her. I think she is a voice of wisdom on the podcast, so I really enjoyed that.
Oh, it's the first time? All right.
The banter and things. Just wanted to say that. I don't know. I remember John emailed us last week, and he was asking about intuition. And I don't know if you got a chance to ask about that, but I did look up some studies on that. And I know John did as well.
Yeah. I haven't read the guy's book yet. The fellow that was on the David Eagleman podcast, which sparked my interest in it, because I hadn't really thought about it. You know, what's the scientific, underpinnings of
women's intuition?
Yeah, of these kind of judgments using intuition. When is it scientifically validated?
I don't got no intuition.
Right in there from the quote unquote female perspective. But just the way Pete said, almost always, there's a little bit nice little adjective or describer in front of that, women's intuition. And if you look into, what is one of the definitions of intuition, or the way I see it, it's knowing without knowing, or knowing without supposed knowledge. And you don't have to go back too many generations wherein males were educated and women weren't. Right. So when a male came and knew something, it was his acquired knowledge, it was his intelligence, etc. When a female did, it was her intuition, because they could not explain or did not care to explain how she would supposedly know something. But if we go more into the literature and the science on this, I think it's just all of these subtle recognitions of patterns of information, whether it's the wincing of an eye, the flush of a face, the way somebody moves or talks. It's all this information that we absorb, but
Feedback.
Not necessarily on a conscious level. But we feed all of that into our experience and patterns, and when we see it again, it has an intuitive meaning. I think the only difference is we have not written it down. And this is where I think one of the articles went into intuition of detectives. Is it a gut feeling? No, I think it just boils down to experience. And that's where we loop back into, females' intuition, detectives' intuition, unless you're a CIA agent that has been schooled in something, and then we don't call it intuition anymore. So I think it's a fascinating discussion on all of that, but it's so informed by history and genderism. How we bank knowledge.
Dr. Mari, have you heard of the book Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist? He's an Oxford neuropsychiatrist. And one of the things he points out is women have a more developed corpus callosum, which unites the hemispheres. And that theoretically allows them to integrate more different types of information at once into their thinking. He talks about right brain and left brain. He says, right brain thinking has not been discredited as much as people think it has, and that the right brain is an open focus of attention, and it tends to see things in the whole, whereas the left brain is more discrete and it's tied to language, which is on our left sides. The point being, I have female friends that will be on the dating sphere, and they're describing the men, and another friend, or they'll say, I don't know, I just don't have a good feeling. And there is probably streams of information they're getting, but they can't serialize or discretize it so they can say it, if that makes sense. But it's no less valid. And sometimes it's more, in fact, McGilchrist argues it's more accurate. Go on.
Yeah, no, I think so as well. The other thing is, if you look into historically, females always need to be more cautious than males. They need to read signs because they can't rely on the brawn so much, right? The quote unquote mental capacity or intuitive capacity of reading body language is much, much more important for females than males. So it makes a lot of sense that that would become more and more developed in females. Now, the interesting study would be what that looks like at 3 or 4. As opposed to when females hit puberty. But actually, arguably, females are more prone to needing to be more aware than males at a much younger age, anyways, even prepubescent.
But males and females are not looking at each other in the eyes when they communicate because of the dang phones. You think that's going to play a role? Trust. It could be a trust thing. Delay of, we say, today's 20 or 30-year-old is, 15-year-old 10 years ago, whatever the number is that slowing us down?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's no question there.
Can't pick up any cues.
In terms of our ability to read cues, when you screw around with temporal frequency, we all get a little bit anxious. We all kind of judge a little bit more. We all go more towards the negative. You never think of that person is not responding to me because they're going to make a cup of tea. You're like, what's wrong? They're rejecting me, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, you guys know, maybe not Anthony, but I can go on, hours for this. I've literally lectured for 3 days on this. So,
Josh Moore, and I believe it, Mark, Josh Moore, who I needed to get with his assistant because I think he works through an assistant. So that's why he's not here, I think. But anyway, he mentioned that during the pandemic, he started to see an influx of clients with greater mu rhythm.
Yes.
And one of the things, so we know that mu reflects frontal lobe disconnection, as Jay talks about. And I looked up, I found out it only desynchronizes to biological motion. When they show people a robot, let's say, it doesn't desynchronize. They actually did this experiment. So if you imagine, I'm wondering, people are remote working more. They're going out less. They're going to the movies less. The box office until Inside Out apparently was down 50% this year, something ridiculous. So we're going out less. And that may be eroding our social skills because as Jay will talk about, mirror neurons are contained in the frontal lobe, and it allows you to have theory of mind, to see, to feel as another may feel. And if you have more disconnection, that's hard to do. So I wonder if that's going on.
Oh, I'm 100% with you. And, if that's happening to individuals after the age of 26, when in theory we're all fully cerebrally developed, but where that really is screwing around is in early development. My research and that of others is showing, in some cases you can't get that back. We're seeing autistic-like symptoms in children that do not have autism. The ability to read facial cues and emotional cues. There are windows on this, in the attachment phase, which is like 0 to 3. And this is a big, big deal. I mean, a lot of us have been concerned about, the immune function of children born within the pandemic. We're seeing some of the effects of that. But in terms of the emotional intelligence, or what we used to call emotional intelligence, not just introverted and extroverted, but the ability to have a true empathy, not taught empathy, living outside of self. I think a lot of that is compromised in the ones not just born within that time, but the first stages of development occurred in quote unquote lockdown, especially if you were a single child.
Yeah. Yeah, they did a piece on this on the news. I think it was just in the last couple of days to exactly that point. They're noticing that these, 3 to 5-year-olds are just not as competent at school as the traditional expectations would suggest. Tying their shoes. I mean, really silly, some really obvious, like, wow, really?
Well, if you didn't have to wear shoes for 3 years, you might be a little bit behind.
That's fair enough. I'm not wearing
Sorry,
pants.
you walked into that one,
Yeah,
John.
no, it's true. I'm not wearing pants right now. So, yeah, there you are. No, I'm wearing pants. I'm just kidding.
Well, it gets to, what do we want to teach in school? That's a whole nother matzo ball out there. But
Yeah.
these kids come. So the way things are going now, if the kids, whatever you want to say, soft, delayed, or whatever, what's going to happen to their kids? That means they got to get toughened up because they've been ignored. What's going to happen?
Well, I kind of look at it the same way you look at language acquisition. Okay, if you have a first language speaker teach somebody their language, great. Okay, if you have a person who's they're teaching their second language to somebody, you're going to be always, I don't care how good you are, there's going to be a bit missing. Okay, and then if that person teaches that language to somebody, you can see how that goes down. And I think that is happening now in terms of emotive language. Again, I keep on going back to the ability to read facial cues. This is just a basic exposure, right? If you have an infant, I call them, iBabies or iPad in the cradle, and then a parent always on the phone, like the ability to interact and communicate is greatly compromised. So that parent is the individual responsible for teaching that child through interpersonal interaction. I call it tickle, touch, and coo. When that isn't happening, that child is going to be compromised. How does that child interact with peers? And if they choose to become a parent after, how do they interact with that child? And we're already in that quote unquote experiment, right? We're on like 2.5 generations now, where it was possible to have excessive and exclusive interactive screen use. I mean, it's happening. It's absolutely happening. We're there.
Dr. Mar, all those studies that say that, kids are on phones and this seems to correlate with mental illness.
Yeah.
I saw something that those same studies are saying the parents are on the phone too.
Yeah.
And so what it recommended, I've seen a couple of times, is if you're concerned about your kids being on the phone all the time, and I'm a parent, so I won't say this is easier, I know, but maybe you could monitor your own usage.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to digress a cute little story. Gosh, this is going back probably 15 years at least, maybe even 20. Oh no, I'm aging myself. But yeah, a parent coming in and, plopping on the couch. Best tool in my office, by the way, is the couch. And just going on and on about, the child being on their phone all the time. And at a certain point, an adolescent, just with pure explicit language, what the F do you expect me to do? You're on your goddamn phone all the time. I said nothing. Nothing.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's telling.
Yeah. But I mean, I talk about this as well, and again, when I lecture, I mean, I do a couple of interactive little scenes and things, but what is happening to a child when a parent is on the phone or on a computer and present? Okay, the child is getting a message of being ignored. The child is getting a message that they are not important. I argue you're actually better off not being there than being there, not there. And if we even go down to the known effects of this, what was one of the #1 punishments of my generation? The silent treatment. There and not there. Would that have changed within 1 or 2 generations? That the effect of being there and not paying attention, being there and not being available for extended periods of time? Why would that change in terms of how the child receives that? And of course, the answer is it hasn't.
Yeah. Dr. Mari, I think it may have been Sebern Fisher, maybe Dr. Lanius, who said on this program, they said, in some ways, neglect may be worse than other forms of abuse.
It is, yeah.
It may have been you actually said it doesn't give the brain anything to form around or something with something.
Yeah. No, they even, that's gone like the child that's bullied in school. believe it or not, does better than the child who's socially rejected as well. I mean, it's strange. You know, we have all those sticks and stones melodies, but it's actually the opposite. Yeah,
Well,
the
it's the
name.
absence of
Well, because at
feedback.
least bullying is a form of attention. You know, it's the
Wow.
disregard
Well, you
for the
exist.
person. Yeah,
You
that you
exist.
exist, that you're worth me beating you up. You know, to look at it from the police perspective.
No, I mean, it's twisted, but I mean
Yeah.
that's the level that
No,
we're
makes-
conversing at. This is how twisted it has gotten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
But
was
what
on.
gets me is, why don't we get this? I mean, Pete, I'm not going to spin back into politics, okay? But you know, the points are starting to converge and loop. Like, why fundamentally is this so hard to grasp?
Yeah. You've had Pete. You've had Sebern Fisher on the show, yeah.
Yep.
A neuroneedle. I was
Yep.
on a call with her this morning, a video call about this new deep brain reorienting. It's just gaining some traction. A Scottish fellow, Dr. Corrigan, is promoting this, and Sebern is saying that it is probably the key to trauma resolution. It's a long, involved scientific conversation, which I don't want to go into here necessarily, but it was such a hopeful conversation because, you know, Mar, early in the early childhood developmental window, when a child is ignored, you know, that face turning to the caregiver.
Yeah.
And not getting what they need
Yeah.
sets in motion a lifelong issue of attachment issues, attachment problems. This fits right into Ruth Lanius's research as well. But it's a fascinating thing. So I throw it out to your audience. Deep brain reorienting. It's not well known. It's not practiced by a lot of people. I actually found somebody here in Los Angeles who's trained in it, so I'm thrilled because it's really something I want to go after for some of our trauma clients that come here.
Well, we can invite her on the standard neuronoodle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's speaking at it at the trauma conference and a thing in South Africa. So I mean, it's gaining some traction, and she has my undying support.
We'll get her. We'll get her on.
Yeah,
and Ruth.
Yeah,
and Ruth. Yeah, have both on. There you go.
Yeah,
because you've had Ruth on as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had her on twice.
PTSD. Yeah, another Canadian.
Yeah. You could get Corrigan on, but you can get Corrigan on, I expect, but I warn you, he speaks with a thick accent. He's really tough. He's tough to listen to.
It'd be worse than me.
Oh, yeah, you're fine. No, he's like, what did he say?
This is why it's open chat. So the people
exactly. But
it's
really a fascinating discussion about going deeper than the amygdala for looking for, threat responses, that this is more periaqueductal gray. This is, superior colliculus. This is really a deep brain stem organization around how we perceive threat and how we respond to it emotionally. It's fascinating stuff.
Okay, I'm open.
Yeah.
Anthony, you want to close something out? We're at the end here. What, you got anything, your 10,000 member chat room?
Well, this is going to be ending on a downer a little bit, but this is why I brought up the neglect.
Bummer.
It was shocking. I mean, this came out yesterday in the San Francisco Chronicle. The name of the article, Pete, for people looking, is America's focus on teen social media is obscuring the biggest causes of youth depression and suicide. And what it discussed is the same CDC survey that tells researchers that we may have a problem with phones. What it actually highlights is the biggest problem with teen mental health is apparently abuse. Unfortunately, still. And they actually gave the statistic. Teens who are abused by parents and household adults are at 21 times more likely to commit suicide and 22 times more likely to commit self-harm. And so I don't know. Obviously, I don't have the answer to all that. But I thought it was important that some of these social media studies, even though there's probably something there, they're showing relatively smaller effects than this. And again, I don't know. At first, I was scratching my head. Could everyone be?
I'm going to throw one out here.
I don't know.
What are they defining as abuse?
Good question.
Okay, because I mean, you want to be really careful here in terms
Good
of,
point.
you know, what you accept and don't accept. And I think we've come a
Yeah.
long way in terms of what is acceptable parenting behavior versus not. But I think, you know, the pendulum has really gone, you know, if a parent yells at a child, okay, perhaps not the greatest thing, but any parent who says they never yell at their child, quite frankly, is lying. And is that, you know, is that considered a form of abuse? Because some of those assessments that I've seen now in these checklists, you know, any human at this point would be consistently abusive in the face of a 2-year-old or a 13-year-old in terms of the behaviors that they're trying to mitigate. So any thoughts on that?
Yes. So this is how they define it. This is from the CDC website that they cite, and it says more than half of teens surveyed, 55%, reported experiencing emotional abuse by a parent or adult, including swearing at, insulting, or putting them down. 11% experienced physical abuse by a parent or other adult in the home, unfortunately, including hitting, beating, kicking, or physically hurting the student.
Spanking.
This is a survey of students, yeah. Yeah, there was also some things in here about job loss affects the student. It creates a crisis in the home. And then even the fentanyl epidemic and drug epidemics, things like that, those can be brought home by the, well, clearly by the parent, unfortunately. So I guess I just wanted to say this because, like, for instance, I don't think it's just phones, because there's some research I saw in Time magazine that, not to pick on one thing, but apparently narcissism has increased by a factor of 3 since the boomers. This was one study. There was an Atlantic piece, or no, this was a U-Michigan study that I posted this week. It's from like 2013 though, but it said that empathy may have declined 30 or 49% since 1989 to 2009, as measured by something called the IRI. It's a empathy inventory. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is there's an Atlantic piece, and what it said is, I've mentioned this before, but apparently a majority of U.S. college students now qualify as avoidantly attached on standard attachment style surveys. And so I feel like there is a coarsening. I don't know if it is generational neglect compounding, or if it's modern life, the paradox of choice. Anxiety increases. We have too much choice. Life moves faster. We have to retool. I don't know. Social media.
That's belonging. That's belonging. I think we have a convergence of things, but leading the pack, I think, was the interactive technologies over interactive, interpersonal, what I call face-to-face and heart-to-heart. And then when you compile all these other things, but Anthony, I love the point that you picked up, is something about, you know, the quote unquote free love hippie generation that was very independently, narcissistically entrepreneurial. We think that that's a positive thing, but, you know, not working with community, et cetera. Like there's this whole other side to that. And the notion of free love is also not having attachment in interpersonal, primary romantic or sexual relationships. So there's this whole other side to that generation that never got first page. Yeah. So
one last thing I'll leave on a positive note. You mentioned belonging, Dr. Mari, and I just read something just today before I came on. It's in Scientific American. It's about ketamine. And they wanted to try to get rid of placebo effects from ketamine studies. This was a surgeon at Stanford. And here's the thing, you know when you've been given ketamine and you know when you haven't, kind of. And so they're trying to get rid of some of the unique effects that can contaminate psychedelic studies. So what they did was they gave ketamine to people who were already receiving surgery, so they would not be awake for the dissociative trip-like effects. And then they wanted to see, would they still get better? And the most surprising thing they found is even 60% of the placebo receivers also got better after the surgery, which is not common because people actually tend to decline under normal conditions after surgery. So they asked the doctor why. He said, I think it was the hours and hours of interpersonal contact that we went through with the patients, learning their histories. He said they felt known the positive
Yes.
impact of it. Non-drug factors such as expectations of feelings and hope, I'm reading from the study, contribute a substantial portion to the effects we've seen, and it would be foolish to disregard those. And in many of these psychedelic studies, last note, they're given in tandem with therapy, with CBT, other types of therapeutic talk therapy. So belonging,
complete caring, and caring to the degree that
Caring.
the session is not your classic 50 minutes, get out of here. It's, well, okay, I'm exaggerating. They're longer sessions. There's tons of preparation. There are buffer hours, but like you are so quote unquote taken care of. Yeah, no, I think you're really onto something there, Anthony.
Yeah, and this is the danger of how many places offer ketamine-assisted therapy. You go to some, clinic in a mini mall, and you're ejected. I've had client do this repeatedly and wondered why he didn't get an effect on his depression. They inject him with some, whatever the dose was, and they put him in a room, and they come back an hour later. That's it. See ya. Yeah. I don't even understand what that is. And, ketamine lozenges delivered to your house. Well, yeah, that's a drug dealer, as far as I'm concerned. That's not a therapy. That's not a therapy.
Yeah,
my friend has done it.
I make no. I'm very, very direct. And in terms of a lot of these therapies now, I'm sitting back and I'm watching. Right. Yeah. There's a conservative side to myself, and I'm very open about it. And I'm not even on the fence. I'm on the other side of the fence. Watching.
Show me.
Tell me about your friend.
I had a friend. Thank you, Pete. Sorry. I had a friend that has done ketamine both for depression and for chronic pain in clinic. And he says in both times, he had to have somebody come and pick him up. He was not able to. And I don't know if his is represented, but he's disoriented afterwards each time. And so, and then also, I just want to bring up Matthew Perry. That he was getting it probably illegally, there may be criminal action, but this is a drug that I had thought of it as purely harmless, right? It's got to be harmless, but I guess it was enough to possibly, in combination with the buprenorphine he was on, to sedate him enough that he didn't wake up when he fell asleep in a hot tub one day. So, yeah.
We don't know enough. But the ketamine clinic thing is just so offensive to me. I can't comment. I just don't understand the thesis behind why you would do that to another human being and expect a result. I worked in a trauma clinic for a while, and I watched what the psychiatrist who ran the clinic would do with ketamine as the agent. He would spend, this is a professional psychiatrist, he would spend an hour of prep with the patient. He'd go through the entire ketamine experience and then another hour or two of debrief. That's the way to do ketamine. Heroic doses, I grant you, for serious people. That's the legit way to do it. Lozenges delivered to your house, some clinic with a low dose IV, in a mini mall. Come on. This is irresponsible.
Yeah. But also, 4 hours or 5 hours of beautiful therapeutic attention. What are we really talking about in terms of mechanism of action? Right. And something to quote unquote relax you. I don't know. Okay. No, I'm being devil's advocate, being a bit facetious here. But if your therapist came by, you went to the liquor store, you sat there, you picked out the bottle, you chatted about things, you go comfy on the couch, sit down, you pour a couple of glasses of wine, your therapist hangs around until the effects of the wine go off, and right.
No, but I think there is a mechanism that ketamine or any number of psilocybin, MDMA can. Of course there is.
But I think we're just magnifying this into like the drug sent by the gods.
Exactly. So. It's not about the drug. Yeah. That's not the point of it. The point isn't the ketamine or the psilocybin or the MDMA. The point is the relationship you're having within that therapeutic surround, that context. It's always about that.
And what is the primary effect of MDMA? Belonging. It's the love drug. Right?
Yep.
Oh, so that's right.
There is a biology to it, as you're acknowledging. Yeah, but it's got to be context. It's lovely to belong, but just don't try to belong at a Hell's Angels convention. It's probably not the right context for you.
You cannot do ketamine and neurofeedback in the same office without soundproof walls. That's all I'm saying.
I've done neurofeedback before a ketamine experience, and I've done neurofeedback with a client post ketamine. So I have both sort of viewpoints on how perhaps to integrate this. But
it's just noisy. That's all I'm saying. It's just noisy. And that's from a non-professional.
There's a lot of crying and screaming. It's true.
Wow.
And I'm not laughing at it. I'm just being real.
No.
It's not one thing that got us into this. It's not going to be one thing that get us out. Whatever it works, say God bless America. You can still say that these days. Dr. Marie Swingle, Anthony Ramos, John Mekrut. Another nice open chat here on the NeuroNoodle Open Chat, or whatever we want to call it. Have a great 4th of July, and Dr. Marie, have a great work day tomorrow.
That's right. The 5th of July in Stockholm.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. All right,
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Next week.
Good chat.
All right.
Nice to see you.
Bye-bye.